everybody. Welcome back to the Few podcast. And today we are going to talk about emergencies. And, emergencies are not just moments of crisis where we have lots of urgent decisions to make. They usually also have this element of surprise. We're caught off guard. And whether it's a storm or a medical crisis, even, a pet emergency where you have to make decisions about immediate care for them, it always seems as though life just doesn't wait until you're in a space of zen and peace.
You mean you can't plan for these? Like just to happen, when you want it to
And
happen?
there's a reason why there's a saying of when it rains, it pours. And I think that's very apt for describing many situations with emergencies. And for me, Hurricane Helene has stood out as a wake-up call. It was a storm that we were not expecting. We thought it would bypass us. And it ended up being truly one of the most chaotic nights of my life and many, many people's lives that are in our community. And in the days following, especially the first few days after, we were reminded over and over again just how incredible having that financial preparation and some very specific things that are related to your finances and how you can prepare for these types of emergencies, how much of an impact it makes. So today, I know we're going to talk more about that story. We're going to unpack some of the lessons that it taught me and others in the community that I've spoken with in the days following. And, it's moments like this when you truly learn that an emergency fund is not just about finances. It is about creating and providing you with that peace of mind.
Indeed. And we're recording here in Pasadena, California today. But if people don't know, you live in Augusta, Georgia.
That's right. Yeah.
And based on what was going on, you guys weren't necessarily expecting the storm to head that way. It kind of diverted and went more east than where the path was kind of showing. So
That's right.
let's jump in a little bit and talk about that. So what was kind of your initial reaction to the hurricane warning that you got?
So that, again, we didn't get a hurricane warning. The cone that they talk about, we were right of the cone. We were not in any of the shaded area. We thought the hurricane was going to go directly over Atlanta, curve a little left. I was worried for my family.
Yeah.
My youngest was with my parents who were inside the path of that cone.
Oh, yeah.
And
That's right.
so, I was more concerned for other people than I was for myself. And I think that was probably some of the similar feelings of people in our community because, the grocery stores weren't being ravaged of bread and milk and all these goods that most people do go
Right.
in and buy in bulk whenever we're expecting a situation like this. The gas stations weren't backed up. There was no sense of emergency in our community in the days, and even the day before leading up to this event. So
Yeah. So you guys thought everything was going to be fine.
Yeah, we
Maybe
were
you
not
got some
preparing.
rain, whatever,
Yeah.
because you were kind of on the outer zones of it.
Yeah, we did have
possibly.
some rain warnings and flood warnings, but again, none of these things in the past have ever presented a situation like what we were about to be faced with that night.
So you went to sleep like, I'm good, nothing to worry about.
Yeah. The only thing that I did, I called my parents and just checked in with them one more time. And then I told our oldest, who was home with us, I said, there's a chance that I may wake you up in the middle of the night to come downstairs. If I do, I need you to immediately get up and come down because I won't wake you up unless I expect that there's going to be an issue.
Okay, so you had a little inkling in the back of your just in case,
just
the
in
1% chance. All
Just
right.
in case. So that was the only thing that I did to prepare. I filled up my car with gas because I was on empty the day before.
Okay.
Not because, I would have done any other day, just because I was on empty. Not because I was prepared.
Got you.
Preparing for this.
So share with us, how did the night unfold? What was going through your mind a little bit?
So we went to bed. I laid down in bed and I did the classic wife thing where I rolled over to my husband and I was like, do you think we need to worry about the trampoline in the backyard before? Do we need to go flip that thing upside down? And then really what I was communicating with him was, are you worried enough that you need to get yourself out of bed to go outside at night in the dark and flip the trampoline upside down because he knew I wasn't going to do that.
Better question is, why do you even have a trampoline?
Our youngest still likes it. She goes out there, enjoys it. So so that was what I was communicating to him. Are you worried about this enough that you need to get up out of bed?
Got you.
Now that we're both tucked in, lights are out. And so he said no. And I said, okay, well, good, because that means it's your fault if it does become a problem. That's what I'm thinking to myself.
Right.
This is what we do. And that was the last thought I had of it was, we might get some wind and it's probably going to be fine. And at 4 a.m., I woke up to something slamming into the side of our house. And my first thought, of course, was, well, he was wrong. We did need to be worried. It ended up not being the trampoline at that time. It was some of our patio furniture that was very heavy. So I got up out of bed and grabbed my phone and walked to the back, opened the back door to look on the back porch to see what it was that had hit the house. And at the same time that I flipped the lights on the back patio, all of our power.
Oh.
And I knew immediately that was a problem because all of our power lines are underground in our neighborhoods. We never lose power unless it's truly something catastrophic.
Yeah.
And so the lights went out and I closed the door. It felt weird. It was warm outside and
humid.
It's always humid there, but
okay.
At night it cools off.
Right.
And it did not feel cool at all. So I kind of noted that, thought that's weird. Tried to close the door tugged away from me with a pretty big burst of wind. So that kind of startled me a bit. And as soon as I got back inside, I pulled up my phone to look and check out what the radar said about the weather. Because again, all of my kind of alarm bells, things are not quite the way that they should be right now, are going off.
Right.
And we didn't have any cell service.
Ooh.
And that has never happened even once in our neighborhood. I've never opened my phone up and not had cell service. So we didn't have power, so I didn't have Wi-Fi. I didn't have cell service on my phone. It was weird and hot outside. So the wind had been strong enough to pick up very heavy patio furniture and throw it against our house. I went and got our oldest and then said, you got to come down now. And then for the next 2.5 hours, we did some combination of being in the closet, being on the floor. I went back to the bed at one point because I was like, if we die, we die. Like, at this point, we don't have any.
You have no idea what's happening.
Idea of what's going on.
Yeah.
And
kind of shut out from the world once the Wi-Fi and cell phone service goes out.
Yeah, I knew the storm was big enough that if it was going to have its way, there's really nothing that we could do. So we don't have a basement, so we just hunkered down. But for 2.5 hours, it felt like a train was driving through my backyard.
Wow.
And it was just a really scary night because again, it felt really out of control
it's crazy
from a weather standpoint.
Yeah, we don't really deal with that here in LA, but we have earthquakes and so forth. Yeah. But which you can't really plan for, and even then, that doesn't really matter. But they will have its way with you, like it or not. Tell me kind of how that experience changed your perspective on emergencies. Was there something different after experiencing that where you're saying, I hadn't thought about this, or this is probably what we need to plan for going forward?
Yeah. So it became very apparent in the next few days that the people who had cash on hand and gas in their car had motility, had the ability to make decisions for themselves. Whether they wanted to stay or wanted to leave, they could.
Right.
And I mean, it took from the time that the sun came up, so let's say 7:30 that morning, it was 11:30 before we were able to make it out of our neighborhood because there were trees down everywhere.
Right.
There was some aspect of you can't go anywhere because you're blocked in by trees and debris. But beyond that, when the roads were cleared, there were still thousands of people who couldn't go anywhere because they didn't have enough gas to get far enough away. So It was 60 miles whenever we did travel. It was 60 miles before we were past tree damage into a place where gas stations had electricity and were
Yeah,
functioning.
that's a large impact. Tell me a
So,
little bit more about the cash, because it's something we don't think about, especially in this digital world that we're in, whether it be credit cards, whether it be utilizing stuff like a Venmo or something, even just to send cash, quote unquote, to people. Tell me about that experience.
so I've never been one that feels I need to have a significant amount of cash
Yeah,
on
I don't think
hand.
I ever have more than $20 in my pocket,
Right.
to be honest with you. It's just no point anymore.
Yeah. I do have an opinion about how useful cash will be if the world really does shut down
Hmm.
as a global experience or even
Right.
as a national experience. But in this particular circumstance, when it was centrally located to our home, and once you got outside of, let's call it that 60-mile perimeter, you did have access again.
Got you.
There was no damage, and the
Electricity was working. Everything
electricity
was
was
normal.
working. Mhm.
Okay.
But again, you had to have the ability to get there.
Right.
And once you did get there, even still, sometimes the debit card machines were not functioning. It's some of those, the further out you went, there was some impact. There's some ripple effects. But that, my parents always had freezer money growing up. And I'm giving away family secrets. So if you ever break into my family's house, if you want
They
to
don't know
know,
where they live. Don't worry.
you're not going to rob them blind. But there was always money in the freezer growing up, and that was a place where mom would go and
Got
grab
you.
cash if we needed to have cash for an event at school.
Literally cold hard cash.
Cold
Huh?
hard cash, yeah.
All right, got it.
Literally cold hard cash. So that's something that I started doing several years back as well. It's just
Okay.
keeping cash. And again, it was for those moments where cash was absolutely needed, and
Right.
that didn't happen very often. In this case, cash was the only way to access groceries, to access gas, to access other services. There was just no functioning because all of the cell service towers were down. Nobody had power.
Yeah.
It was the only means of exchange for goods and services.
This makes me think, I know this is kind of a tangent, but this makes me think about those gold bugs that are like, you need to keep gold in case this happens. I'm like, how are you going to exchange gold? You're going to like sit there and like carve off a piece of the bar and to give it to
It would
somebody
have
to pay
been
for something?
absolutely useless in this
Yeah.
scenario.
And just,
But cash was extremely useful. And again, we didn't need more than a few $100 to get through that situation. It's not like somebody has to keep thousands of dollars in their freezer
yeah.
money, but it was in that moment helpful to get us through that week of crisis, for us to feel confident that no matter what we needed, well, we could pay for it.
So you shared with me, obviously, where you're going through this, we were finally able to get a hold of you and connect. You were kind of, besides the devastation there, unfortunately, you also shared what was going on and how insurance played into all of this. Uh, tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so we had some friends, and then I saw some other stories come out from people that we didn't know, but they were still in the same situation, who were finding out that their insurance policies had what was called a hurricane deductible.
Oh, wow.
And that deductible was different than their regular deductible. And the way that it was different was, instead of them, for example, on a homeowner's policy, you might have a $500 deductible, 1,000, 2,500. There's a range, but most people have somewhere inside that range of $500 to $5,000. And that means that if damage occurs to your home, you're coming out of your pocket for that much. But if the damage exceeds that amount, so in this event, let's say it's $20,000 worth of tree damage on your home, and you have a $1,000 deductible, all you got to be able to pay for is that $1,000. The insurance is going to cover the other 19.
Right.
Well, because this damage was related to a hurricane, it checked the box of that hurricane deductible coming into play. And instead of it being a set number, it was a percentage. And it's a percentage of the home's value that you insured. So if your home
Current value
that you insured against. So if you had insured your home for up to $400,000, let's just say, just maybe an average home in our neighborhood and surrounding neighborhoods, the deductible was a percentage of that. Maybe let's say 5% was what I was finding was pretty
Okay.
standard.
So like 20 grand or
So
whatever.
someone would have to come out of pocket 20 grand before insurance would step in and pay
Interesting.
anything as well. And most people don't keep $20,000 of emergency fund in place.
Or most people probably don't even know that that's even there
They didn't know that it was there.
in the insurance.
And so there was a lot of people who were having to figure out how to cover their own costs of repair in ways other than utilizing and leaning into your insurance company. And this is the moment where you think my insurance is going to come through for me. A lot of times people were finding out that it wasn't.
Oh, that's
It was
horrible.
really, financially devastating.
So that kind of dovetails into my next question of why do you think people often overlook the importance of that emergency fund and being ready for a disaster like this?
I think it's a combination. Behaviorally, maybe a mindset of I can always figure it out. I've always figured it out before. I can figure it out again. In moments like this, and where the destruction is so widespread and the need is so big, you are not only facing your own financial capabilities and resources, but you're also being prioritized based on what you are able to financially commit to.
Right.
So if you had a tree service that's going around saying, I can get that tree off your house, and you're having to go through insurance in order for them to okay this damage, this repair,
Right.
you're getting prioritized differently than somebody who says, I have $10,000 I can pay you today in cash. I can write you a check today.
Of course.
You get prioritized differently than someone who has those resources in place. And so it wasn't just a matter of, are you capable of figuring it out? Because I think we, as humans, we are very resourceful.
And they might not even be accepting like checks and stuff because there's no way for them to see if the funds are available or whatever the case is.
It's not just about, are you able to figure it out? It's how immediate be with your financial resources. And how can you put yourself higher up on the priority list of getting your repairs and your services taken care of? And I think that may be something that gets overlooked whenever you do have that mindset of, I'll figure it out. I can figure it out. I know I don't have the cash right now. And then the other piece of it is maybe the need feels too great. Maybe the financial need in order to be prepared for an emergency feels too great. And people underestimate the value of just putting $10 a week into an emergency fund and how that can grow over time.
Yeah.
And how even just having $200 available is still better than having
100%.
So
100%.
yeah.
I know you created a great resource for
Yeah.
people to prep for emergencies, which will link to that
Absolutely.
in the show notes. And people can go to, if you're listening to this, just go to joinfew.com and you'll be able to download that resource. So last thing I wanted to ask before we wrap here, what were some of the key takeaways from this experience with the hurricane?
The biggest one was to be as prepared as you can. And, that again is going to be related to your own deductibles. It's a very personalized preparation piece. You have to think about, what do I need? What can't I access in times like this? And it does maybe sometimes help to have someone help you think outside the box for that. But, first of all, is just take an inventory of what you personally need. Look through your insurance documents and really be sure that you can cover in a situation. The second part is that how much cash really, again, it doesn't need to be a lot of cash, but having some cash did make a difference.
Yeah.
And then third is how much community people that you can lean into does matter in a situation like this. Not even, we were able to go to my parents' house for a few days. That provided some respite. And my daughter could pack up her computer and take it there because that's her main connection to friends, is through playing online games. And so all of those, even mental health pieces, get put back into place more quickly, more easily when you have a trusted support network that you can lean into. So don't just take an inventory of your finances and your insurance documents, but take an inventory and of the people that you know you can lean into in situations like this. All of those things really did make an impact and a difference for us.
Well, I'm sorry you experienced that,
Thank you.
but I appreciate you sharing the story, and I think it'll be helpful for our listeners here. If you get a chance, if you have questions, please check out the resource guide that Jess put together, again at joinfew.com. And thanks for joining us.